The following presentation was recorded live in Orlando, Florida, for the 17th Annual Convention of the International Association of Square Dance Callers in 1990.
Good morning. We're glad to have you with us. We're sorry you missed the launch. They canceled it, in case you didn't hear. Said that not enough of the CALLERLAB members attended. Thought they'd wait a couple days till we finished our business, and then we could go down and see what we really came for, right? The big launch. And that's unfortunate. There are folks sitting in traffic and will be long about 1 o'clock this afternoon still, I suspect. They were showing the roads. Amazing. This morning, we have a topic that is vitally important to the activity. I'm sorry we do not have more callers here, but we are being taped. And to that end, when we get to the point of questions and comments, we will ask you to use the microphone on the middle of the floor, because it's going to go out to our membership, those who couldn't be here, and it's something they do need to hear about. I will tell you that this morning we are all working with Jerry Junck from Carroll, Nebraska, population 250. We finally found a place smaller than Pocono Pines. And on my right, John Kay from the infamous Pocono Pines, Pennsylvania, White House capital of CALLERLAB. And myself, John Marshall from Reston, Virginia. We want to talk about what I think is a vitally important aspect of quality fun in dancing. It's that sense of movement, sense of dance smoothness, enjoying the music, things of that sort. I don't have a volume control to offer to you on this. Yeah, I do. Okay, we're tied in. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. I think that quality timing offers a sense of competence to the dancer when they're on the floor. They truly have a sense of being in control of what's going on and enjoying it and moving with the music. That's what dancing's all about. It just plain feels good if the timing is good. Timing is a complex, multi-factored discipline. And discipline will become an important part of it because there are so many different aspects to be balanced by us as we work. Some of us find certain of these factors of timing more fundamental or more critical than others, than other factors. And they stress those. They think they're more important, a more basic integral part. And that's fine if it works for you. Perhaps they're right. But I think that you should see today, all of the components are needed for the best results with the dancers. We're talking about components of music and phrasing and body flow and call design and arrangement of dancers, anticipation by dancers, kinesiology, body movement. Those things are all factors. It's not just one item, in my opinion, and I think you'll find others that agree with us. And we're going to begin to explore as many of those factors as we can today with you. And we're going to start with John Kaltenthaler. If you'll welcome him, please, and we'll get on our way.
Thank you, John. One of the things that is most important to understand, timing is not an isolated factor of the skill of the caller. Timing does not operate by and of itself, but rather it is related to many other facets of the technical competence that we as callers must possess, and we as callers must strive to improve within our own teaching and calling abilities. Certainly, timing is related to the music, and if one does not understand the music, and one does not understand the composition of music to include the breakdown of musical phrases, then a caller is going to have a very difficult time in properly timing his calls and his routines. If we were to have a demonstration square and show you examples of good and bad timing, we could do that, and the most common way in which you do that is you show both the clipped timing or the stacking of calls where you put pressure on the dancer to try to rush through it and never give the dancer quite sufficient time in order to complete the action. The other one that we normally show of bad timing is where we have the dancer complete a move, come to a complete stop, and then go to another move, come to a complete stop, go to another move. Obviously, that is referred to as stop-and-go timing. You hear a great deal of that with some callers. Whether this is because that caller has not analyzed what the call does, and whether or not that caller understands where that call will put the dancers at the completion of the call, in any case, it represents a failure on the part of that caller to call smoothly and with continuity and with proper body flow. Obviously, smooth dancing and body flow have a great deal to do with timing and the feeling of good dancing. Timing and tempo are not synonymous, but timing and phrasing are not synonymous either. Phrasing is one facet of it, the musical phrasing, and the metering of the call to the musical phrase becomes another one. All of these are important understandings and important components of the complex field of timing. And in order to properly go from there, we gave you a handout which is basically going to follow some of the things that we talk about. And obviously, timing starts out with a definition of what it is. Timing is the relationship. There's other copies of it in the back if you didn't get one. They're in the back of the hall if you didn't get one. Timing is the relationship between keywords of the square dance command and the dancing action measured in beats of music. There are three separate components of timing. The first of these is the one called command time. We as callers must learn to give our commands, or try to in all cases, give them in 2 beats. Are all calls deliverable in 2 beats? And the answer is no. Sometimes the key word, the emphasis words that are so essential, take more than 2 beats to give. When that occurs, that means that you must increase the lead time. If you try to say spin chain and exchange the gears in 2 beats, there's no way in the world that you're going to be able to understand that command, is there? At the same point in time, if you give a command such as right and left through, and you take 4 beats to deliver that, right and left through, you're not giving the command correctly in the proper number of beats, are you? It's a right and left through. And if you count the steps of the music, then one of the first things is to give the new caller, especially if you're working with other callers, the training to deliver the calls and the program they're going to work with in the 2 beats allowed. The second aspect of timing is the lead time. And that is referred to as the amount of time prior to the dancer beginning to execute the command that you deliver the command. Here is where timing begins to interrelate to phrasing. That just as with contra dancing and quadrilles, we try to give the command on the beats just prior to the first beat of the musical phrase. That gives us the best feeling of dance. We frequently do this in the opener of a singing call. And then we as callers revert to take the first beat for ourselves and let the dancers fend for themselves. That is command time and lead time. The last aspect of it is the one which is most quantifiable, and that is the execution time. CALLERLAB has worked on the timing of the mainstream program when Dick Ledger was the chairman of the timing committee, and they did a superb job. They timed all of the calls on the mainstream program from most of the allowable formations, and they assigned out a number of steps or a number of beats of music. Does that mean that you have to give every call exactly as that is done? Are there occasions when the dancers will complete it in one less beat or one more beat? Do new dancers and old dancers or experienced dancers take the same time? How about if it's a new call? All of these are variables, you see, so that you don't have, it has to be this way and only this way. So you as a caller have to blend those skills. You as a caller have to blend and make those judgments. When you're teaching new dancers, you may have to allow more reaction time or lead time. The translation time to go from the ear through the brain to figure out what it is that tells the feet what it is they have to do. And for tall people, that sometimes takes longer, you see, for that message to get down to the feet than it does for those short, compact ones. But the point being that as new dancers come into the picture, we have to increase that lead time. Can we still give them that feeling of dancing on the musical phrase? Absolutely. But that's a skill which has to be developed in a caller. Very few callers possess it naturally. So we as experienced callers, those who teach other callers, and you're talking about how to teach timing, you have to understand the interrelationship of these so that you can demonstrate it and give that feeling to the dancer. And then you have to let the dancer dance with the music. Can you do that? Sure. It's difficult. It requires discipline on your part. It requires discipline for you to give the dancer the beat where you can, and for you to discipline yourself not to be greedy and take the first beat of music for yourself. Do all calls fit the 8-beat musical phrase? No. And the proof of the pudding of that is to look at your timing lists and take a look at how long it takes to do a square through from a static square. Anyone out there, how long does it take for how many beats? It takes 10 beats. What's the common length of a musical phrase? 8. Gee, right away you're off the musical phrase, aren't you? So do you cheat them out of 2 beats and say you got to start the next one after only 8 beats? Or do you do something else to make a blending, such as a do-si-do, which then from an 8-chain through takes how many beats? 6. Now we have a musical phrase, don't we? 2 of them. The 10 and the 6 is 16, 2 8-beat musical phrases. But not all calls lend themselves that easily. And then there is the other factor that certain calls, when they blend together, give a different feeling of dance, a different feeling of circuitous pattern, a different feeling of flow, a kinesiological difference, so that you go into something and it feels good. There's an interesting thing about timing in music, which I think is very illustrative of why I say it is easier to call patter than singing calls. And that is, an 8-beat phrase is there, but that consists of 2 4-beat phrases. And that if I'm using beats 1 and 3 to call on, if you will, or 5 and 7, the odd beat in all cases, if I am consistent where I take the beat 1 and I take my 2-beat for command time and my 2-beat for lead time, where do the dancers start? On the 4-beat phrase, don't they? But if they always start on beat 5, they still get that feeling of dancing to the music, don't they? If you took a series of 4 calls, heads promenade, heads do a right and left through, the head lady's chain, and the head lady's chain. You can call those 4 calls in any sequence, and the dance pattern is identical, isn't it? As far as the starting and the completing location, the formation, and the arrangement. But it feels different if I start with a head lady's chain and the head's promenade, right and left through, and the head lady's chain back. That feeling of flow is how we teach timing to dancers. We take strongly phrased music. We try to pre-cue it, and we try to put it together in groups of 8-beat calls in such a way that they get the feeling of dancing to the 8-beat phrases. Singing calls, on the other hand, allow us to take a pattern which has been properly timed and deliver it to the dancers so that they get the first beat of the musical phrase. Grand Square is a classic example of the joys and dangers of phrase calling. The joy of giving the dancer the first beat of the musical phrase. The joy the caller has in warbling and showing how well he or she can sing. But then discipline takes over, An old motor mouth behind the microphone says, boy, I like to listen to myself, and he takes all 32 beats to give the lyrics. What happens when the dancers have finished 32 beats of the grand square? They're finished, but old motor mouth hasn't given the next command yet. He hasn't given the lead time that's next. So what do the dancers do? They develop bad habits to take up the slack because the caller hasn't disciplined himself properly. How often do we see people who then will rush the next call, and I can pick up a dozen singing call records on a dozen different labels and show you chapter and verse where they will say something like, hello, man, and they get it through so quickly because they want to continue to sing and show off. Doesn't it seem strange sometimes that callers forget whether we're calling for our own enjoyment or for the enjoyment of the dancer? Somehow we have to make an attitudinal adjustment, don't we? And recognize that we are there to give the dancer the best possible dance, and we must use self-discipline in order to give the most effective presentation that we can. The other aspect of the grand square is that not only do they not stop in time to pre-cue the next action for the second half of the opener, if you will, but they then sometimes put together choreographic patterns, such as an Alaman left and weave the ring, that when they do that, they will meet their partner on the opposite side of the square. Now, it has taken them approximately 16 beats to get there, and what do they say next? Promenade home. How long does it take to promenade halfway around the square? 8 beats. What are the dancers supposed to do for those other 8 beats? Some record companies don't care. Some callers who then pick up that record don't bother to understand phrasing, understand timing, understand the mechanics of choreography, and understand what moves lead people where, and they go and dutifully repeat the mistakes that the record producer built into the record. How sad. Your obligation as a caller is to know where the dancers are. Your obligation as a caller is to see that the figures you use in a singing call especially are properly timed, and your obligation is to give the dancer the music through self-discipline. Is all that possible? Sure. How do you do it, and how do you best handle that in working with another caller or working with your dancers? I suggest, and I try to do this wherever I can, and that is to select strongly phrased music. And probably the best example of a strong musical phrase, and one which you very seldom can get off phrase, is this one. I'm going to pick it up in the middle. You can hear that musical phrase. You can hear that musical phrase so that you should be able to give the commands ahead of the beat. You can hear this coming to the end of a 32-beat, can't you? Side, space, grand square. They start off. You've got to give that command so that you have that side, space, grand square, so that the dancers get the first beat of not only the 8-beat, not only the 16-beat, but the 32-beat musical phrase. Can you give it on some other phrase? Sure. Does it dance on some other phrase? Probably, but not as well. How many of you use that as a hoedown record? Those of you that don't, I suggest you might want to consider it. It might shock you sometime to find out how much you have to change your style and how much you have to change your patterns. That is TNT, by the way, 157. It's called Real Madrid, and it is an exceptionally strongly phrased hoedown. Another one, which is much more contemporary as far as the orchestration is concerned, but certainly not the tune, is on ESP label called G-string. Strong musical phrase, isn't it? What's the name of the tune? Huh? Anybody know the name of the tune? It's Up Jump the Devil, isn't it? That's Up Jump the Devil, just updated. Now, some of you may have the Up Jump the Devil on the Sunny Hills label. If you have it on the Sunny Hills label, you go back a long ways. Up Jump the Devil has been recorded on at least 6 different labels. This latest one is on ESP, and it is called G-String, and it has numbered 406. Another relatively new label to the market that has strong phrasing is on Eureka label. Some people will listen to some of the instrumentation here, and they will say that's got too much violin, that's too whiny. If that occurs, turn down your treble to remove that yammery violin. Others would rather increase that. So you have those tools at your disposal. But what is the common ingredient in all of these 3 records that I've selected? The musical phrase, the strong 8-beat phrase. This is why an understanding of music is so important in order for you to get good or proper timing. Let's just talk a little bit about tempo from the standpoint that the tendency has been to slow down the tempo as we have gone from the late 1950s up through the present. Most record companies record their music at 132 beats per minute. But that doesn't dance as well as today's choreography as it does if you play it slightly slower. Most frequently, today's choreography dances best if danced in the 126 to 128 range, maybe 130. On the other hand, if your judgment is such and you're calling for a group of young adults or college kids who not only are in the fast learning pace, they are in the more exuberant physical pace, and they may want it at 132 or 134. I had the good fortune of going to Australia in 1985 to do some clinics over there. And over there, the Australians have a tendency to dance at 132 to 134. And over there, the callers have a tendency to shortcut the time that they allow the dancers to finish. And the dancers are very ragged with the Australian callers. They just never seem to get finished. And I've got to relate a story to you that happened to me in Queensland, and Jim Mayo can verify this, having called over there. That I spoke to this caller who had demonstrated his calling ability, and I said, "You ever notice when you call that the dancers never seem to get quite through it? And then when I call, they settle down and they dance beautifully and smoothly?" He said, "Yeah, John, but you don't understand. When you call that slow, your timing has to be perfect." And I kind of looked at him and I said, "I think you got it." Now, we devised a new test, and I want to ask John Marshall if he will take the test for me. John, you have to ask me 2 questions. Number 1 is, what do you do for a living? And 2, what's the most difficult part of your job?
What do you do for a living? What do you do for a living?
I'm a square dance caller.
What do you do for a job?
Let's try that again. Ask me the first question.
Is this a setup?
Yes. No, it's not so. This is a new caller test. You ask me 2 questions. What do I do for a living? What's the hardest thing about my job?
He didn't let me study. What do you do for a living?
I'm a square dance caller.
What kind of a
timing?
Job?
Thank you.
How'd I do?
You did fine, John. You passed. But it is true. Timing is perhaps the most difficult portion of our job as callers. You see examples of good timing, you see examples of acceptable timing, and you see examples of poor timing. Unfortunately, we see far too many poor timing examples of calling. Your job as a caller is to try to balance the choreographic aspects, the musical aspects, the body flow and smooth dancing aspects with the variety and the degree of complexity. Not all dancers want puzzle solving. Some dancers want smooth dancing to the exclusion of all else. Some dancers would like nothing better than 8-beat musical choreography put together on the musical phrase so that they always get the first beat of music. They don't mind standing around and waiting a couple of beats if they're able to dance on the first beat of the musical phrase. But that balancing act is your responsibility as a caller. Your responsibility to blend together those factors that go into timing, to understand fully the command time, the lead time, and the execution time. Does it dance differently if we give the dancer the first beat? You betcha. Singing calls, probably 98% of the callers start the first opener so that the dancers get the first beat. And they're so proud of themselves for having done that, they forget it for the rest of the record. How many of you believe that's pretty close to being the truth? It is, believe me. If you ever want to do a study, go to a national convention sometime and listen to the atrocious timing of so many callers. It will make you sick. And that's one of the reasons that when we set up this convention, we wanted to discuss this question of how to teach timing. In order to teach something, you must first understand it yourself. And we could put on a bunch of singing calls and we could show you chapter and verse how you do this and vary your choreography so that it still times out correctly. But then you have to learn some of the other tricks that supposing the dancers misbehave and cut a corner here or a corner there. How can you then bring them back to the musical phrase? What are my 2-beat, my 4-beat, my 6-beat extenders? And what are my 2-beat, my 4-beat, my 6-beat cutter-outers to make it time better to the musical phrase? Can I get them to the corner for a corner progression? Where do they meet? And how long will the promenade take? And you have to know that 1/4 promenade, 1 1/4, halfway, or 3/4 promenade, how long that takes and where you have to be in the music. Patter calls are forgiving in that if I don't get it exactly to a 64-beat musical phrase, nothing serious happens. The world doesn't come to an end. All the satellites in the sky don't fall and crumble to the ground. But rather, we have an adjustment to make. And that is the balancing act that we as callers must go through. What timing is acceptable and what timing is unacceptable? To me, this is one man's opinion to be sure, but I think it is a reasonable opinion and one which has served me well for 32 years. And that is, unacceptable timing is off-beat calling. I will accept calling on where the caller takes beats 1 and 3, or 5 and 7, if you will. I will not accept it where the caller gives the command so that the dancer has to start on the 2nd or 4th beat of music. That is plain uncomfortable dancing. When you reset a record, what do you have to do if the record resets onto the wrong beat? You have to get the dancers to change feet, don't you? If they're moving along and you suddenly reset the record, you change it and it's on the other foot. What do the dancers do? They do a 2-step, don't they? You ever watch people try to march to a military band? If you're not on the heavy beat of music, what do the dancers do? They change feet. They change that with a 2-step, a step, close, step, so that they've done 3 steps in 2 beats of music. And that's what you as a caller have to do. You have to balance that so that the dancer gets the heavy beat of music for his left foot. The upbeat is what makes him lift his foot. The downbeat says step. Now, rather than go through the whole time frame that we have, I'm going to stop at this point, and I believe Jerry's going to be next.
Thank you, John.
Okay. Good morning. It's nice to be here, and we had hoped there would be more people here, as John said, but yes, it is. It's filling up. Basically, John Kay made a very good comment I hadn't exactly thought of when he began his speech, and he said, to me, when you talk about timing, we talk about quality dancing. I had not termed it or thought of it in those terms. However, I was going to start my session, or my portion of this, that when we talk about timing, I think of smooth dancing. To me, that's what we're here for. I do not like to see fire drills on the dance floor. I like to see smooth dancing, and that's what I address when I talk about timing. Smooth dancing consists of basic elements, and John mentioned them: timing, body flow, use of the music, or more specifically, the phrase of the music. And combining these ingredients together with good caller judgment, which is an intangible, makes for an effortless and an enjoyable evening of dancing. Poor choices of any of the three can adversely affect the smoothness of the dance and the attitudes of the dancers in attendance. I'm going to talk about body flow, and I feel that's really important. To be smooth, dancers must be able to move from the action of one call into the next without interrupting their motion and without having to change the pace or hurry their movement. Also, the action must take into consideration the hand usage and place the body in such a position at the end of one call such that the dancer can continue to the next call without sharply changing the direction of motion. We are talking about teaching timing to callers, not necessarily addressing the issue of how many beats per call here. There's a singing call figure that demonstrates how bad flow, to me, affects timing. It was on a record quite a few years ago, and John, at the bottom there is a singing call right there. I intentionally did not bring the singing call along because I didn't want to embarrass the guy. I brought my own, and my own, I'll tell you right now, this figure ain't on mine, but it really isn't. Can I have 8 guys, just real quick, jump up here? Okay, well, guys, well, I didn't, yes, we do have a lady. Okay, great. Several? Okay. All right. I just want to show you how bad choreography or bad flow affects timing. And again, we'll do just one time through this. You guys are heads, okay? Head square through in the middle and I get before you know. Find the corner, do side, go one time, go. Swing through and then boys run right, bend the line, flutter, wheel around you go. Square through, go 3/4 round. Swing the corner, now you're promenade on down. That is absolutely the worst that I've ever seen. Thank you, guys. That is absolutely the worst thing I've ever seen. And it is on a singing call. Again, I did not bring the singing call. I didn't want to embarrass the guy, but it is on a record label. And I use that when I want to demonstrate how bad choreography, bad flow affects timing and also breaks arms. It really does. It's terrible. Another thing that we're using right now, and you hear a lot of guys using it, I've chosen not to. You hear a lot of guys call star through, veer left. How many guys use it? Right. You know, it is considered, seems to be considered acceptable, and I've heard some really good callers use it. But it's fine for the guys. I mean, they're moving left. You can veer left. But what about the ladies? And okay, here's a lady. Have you danced star through and veer left? I'm sure you probably have. The ladies seem to accept it, or accept our calling it. Again, give me 4 people real quick. Can you do that? Yeah, just 4 is fine. Okay. Okay. Star through, and veer left. Now, the girls seemingly accept this. Just veer to the right and face each other again. Okay. Don't do it yet. What would be wrong with this? If we can use star through and veer left, why not star through? Go ahead and veer right. Boys don't like that. That's right. The boys don't like that. That is horrible flow, and it also affects timing, I think. Thank you, guys. That's what I needed. Body flow, hand usage. When you call, how many guys have you seen call a head square through 4 to a star through? Think about your hands. People are changing hands, trying to change the way they're moving. There are all kinds of things. Body flow affects your timing. It really does. There's another element to smooth dancing is the choice of music. I was going to play some records. John played all of mine. You really did, John. I was surprised at the ones you picked. No, I don't know about that. But, you use different types of music at different types or different parts of the evening. Your workshop record would be different than your beginning record. But John chose a lot of the records that I had chosen. Bobby was one, Real Madrid. So there were thoughts are very close on that. You need a good beat, and the tempo of the music has a big influence on how people move to music, and consequently on your timing. And I know John and I were just visiting here. Both of us do not call as fast as we used to. I used to call right on 45 on that amplifier, 132 beats. I don't call that fast anymore. I would be closer to 128, 130. And especially as the choreography becomes more difficult, I think you have to adjust your tempo to give people time to dance on that beat. I'm going to talk about one other thing, and that's the intangible, which is the caller, or more specifically, caller judgment. Does the caller just call exactly to the music, or does he or she watch the floor to see what the dancers are doing? The caller's timing is just before, and the dancer's timing is on the beat. If some of the dancers are getting behind, do you keep calling to those that are keeping up, or do you adjust and try to keep everyone going? Remember, our job is everybody came to dance. Everybody paid to dance. They're really not interested in what you know. There are what I term helper calls that can save those that are starting to follow or falter and still allow everyone else to keep dancing to the music. Such calls are very handy. We all use them forward and back, right and left through. These calls used at the right time can save the floor without affecting the timing or the body flow of the dancers. Timing lists can tell you how many beats or steps of music it takes to complete a call from a standing stop. However, remember, most of the time, calls are given and executed while dancers are already moving or dancing. This causes each command to be affected by the body flow of the choreography, and by being cognizant of body flow, hand usage, style, or type of music, and being able to adjust to the floor by the use of helper words, smooth dancing can be attained. And again, I really feel strongly that smooth dancing is what we should be looking for. Timing is a very big part of that, but smooth dancing is so important. I wish I had thought of this quote, and I'll close with this, but it came from Daryl Clendenin. It's worth remembering when talking about timing. He says, timing is like money. You spend it just before you get it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. Appreciate it. John Kay has a couple other points he'd like to touch on, and as do I. I'm going to step in ahead of you, John, for just a second, then we'll give it back to you. And I think that give us some time to open up to the floor, too. I'd like to have the fellows have an opportunity and the ladies to have an opportunity to do that. One of the areas where we sometimes set ourselves up to take away the timing from the dancer is how we program our dancers, and we surely do that. One of the ways we do it is by encouraging them as beginners to anticipate. And that's a teaching tool, and there's nothing wrong with it, except we tend to abuse it at times. We encourage anticipation in terms of using rhymes. How many, when you're teaching beginners, have done that? I know way back when we were actually taught, 20-some years ago when we learned to dance, our caller taught us, when you hear me say, up to the middle and back you reel, you know, pass through, you know the next thing's going to be a wheel. We were taught that, and the caller instructed us to recognize, to anticipate, that's what's going to come. And that was fine. I would like to mention that he'd never said, up to the middle and back you reel, pass through, and you turn back. Or pass through and bend the line. He gave us what we anticipated. It made us more successful. We were comfortable. We weren't at all unaware of what was coming. That helped. He didn't sandbag us. We were conditioned to expect that. However, there comes a point when we don't want to call the wheel and deal, and we need to be prepared to not simply throw out, bend the line. We either need to remove the rhyme for the programmed response that we've already built in, or we need to turn around and go the other way, give them more lead time, some indication it's going to be different. Otherwise, you've broken the flow and the timing, because the dancers will get a catch step. They're looking for one thing. They have to do something else. It's really very difficult for the dancer, and we've lost any sense of timing to the floor. If we take and we abuse the conditioned response that we've worked for. So we have to not sandbag the dancer. Some say, well, it's a gimmick, it's cute. Maybe once. After a while, the dancers aren't amused any longer. You're messing up their dancing. And we also talk about instinctive anticipation, where the dancer expects one thing to follow another because it flows, because they go together well, because the kinesiology is such that their body is moving that way. You don't want to fight those. Those are good things. Those feel good, and it makes people feel good about dancing. But it's another aspect of the whole situation of timing. There are so many different elements that we have to balance, and it only comes with practice and time. And I want to go back to John's points earlier. Yes, it is critical we know how many beats of music the call takes, and the timing committee has done a super job of giving us those tools. And in addition to knowing how many and using how many, we also have to understand musical phrase and practice working with a musical phrase. Dick Ledger and I had a discussion when we first got to the convention about this very topic, and one of the things he pointed out to me was that I have developed instinct, or perhaps as a caller I'm a natural at that sense of where to place those particular calls in the phrase of the music. Unfortunately, when I was beginning to call, I didn't have the opportunity of somebody coming down and saying, here it is, first we're going to teach you how to do a contra and give you a sense of what that is all about. I didn't have that opportunity. I kind of succeeded in spite of myself, and that was okay. And then Dick said to me, and that's fine. Now, how do you teach that to a brand new caller? How do you teach instinct? And I thought it was a wonderful question, because I had not thought of it in that fashion before. And this is the kind of thing that we're talking about here. The elements are being broken down at caller schools. The elements of it are being broken down by CALLERLAB and explained in such a way that we can go out and reach the brand new caller. And that's the direction we want to take. Doing these kind of panels helps those of us who haven't had all of that quality background in some of the musical aspects. So I'm glad to see so many people in here. John, you had a couple more points you wanted to make.
Just as Dick Ledger had been chairman of the timing committee when they first started the mainstream program, Dick turned over the reins of the timing committee to Bob Wilson, as he has continued with the timing not only of the Plus program, but the Advanced 1, the Advanced 2 programs. And this convention they had tried to do the challenge, but they did not get enough callers who either dance challenge or who were willing to work with them on the challenge timing. What I'd like to do is to take just a couple of singing calls and show you the difference if I give it with the pre-phrase or the pre-cue so that the dancers get the first beat, and if I take the first beat for myself. So if we could get a square up there, I don't really care if it's mixed sex, but it'd be probably easier if it were correctly formatted with girls and guys. So if we get 4 and 4, it'd be appreciated. Yeah, will the real girls please come forward? Okay, we need one more. There we go, I'm good. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is to start the musical phrase for the opener. Circle left. Love belongs to. Now you can sing whatever you want. The best things in life are free. Element left. Do side do. All the men star left. One time you know. Turn partner by the right, and go left down and find. Swing your own. Come on, everybody sing. Well, love belongs to everyone. The best things in life are free. Head square through 4. I'm giving the dancer the first beat. Do sado because it took 10 beats. Swing through. Now their first beat music. Boys run right. Ferris wheel. Centers pass to and touch your quarter. Scoot back. Swing that corner, lady there. Promenade around the square. Oh, love belongs to everyone. Now I'll take the first beat of the music. It dances different. Head square through. Do sa do. Swing through tonight. Boys run right. Ferris wheel. Pass through and touch a quarter. Scoot back. Swing that corner. Promenade. Oh, love. Now I'm back on the phrase. But it's inconsistency. Everybody see the difference, and you all felt it, didn't you? Which feels better? You're dancing. That's what we would like to get to. Can it be done? I think I illustrated it. It can be done. But it won't be done unless the caller... Oh, I'm sorry. Bob Wilson has corrected me. Dick also was chairman when they did the Plus program timing. I'm sorry, Dick. I didn't know. I know you did all of the mainstream. I didn't realize that you had done the Plus too. But the timing is important to give to the dancer. Now, can you do that at the mainstream? Easily. Can you do it at the Plus? Easily. But do callers do it? No. Why? It requires self-discipline. And callers, for whatever reason, seem to be unwilling or unable to give self-discipline and give them, the dancer, the first beat of the musical phrase. Can you do it with patter? Sure. Is it as easy? No. It's not as easy. It can be done. It has to be phrased. Okay, I'd like to see if we could do this with giving the dancer, give the dancer the first beat of the musical phrase. Bow to the partner, bow to the corner, circle to the left, Allemande left, and a right and left hand. Promenade go round a ring to say, long walk go all the way. When you get back home, heads up to the middle and they come right back. Square through get 4. They're on the musical phrase. Do-a-do-sa-do with the outside pair. Swing to. Boys run right. Bend your line, a right and left through. Flutter wheel. Sweep 1 footer more. And a right and left through. Veer to the left. Now the girls hinge to a diamond circulate. Flip that diamond, girls trade. Recycle. Star through. Lines up to the middle and back. And a right and left through and turn them there. Pass through and wheel and deal. Double pass through and first go left and the next go right. Star through. Then pass through and trade by. Swing through. Boys run to the right, half circulate, and bend your line, you're home. Now, the point being that we did that where the dancers felt good, didn't they? They felt comfortable because they had consistency in dancing to the heavy beat of music. Now, I will be the first to admit it was not everything on the 8-beat musical phrase, but it still felt good because I didn't rush, I gave them time, gave them the execution time, and they were dancing with the beat of the music. It can be done. I will also like to show you now how some callers call the same thing and the dancers stagger step. I will apologize to you in advance, and please do it the way your body makes you feel that you want to do it. Same record. Head square through 4. Swing 2 with the outside 2. Spin your top. And a right or left 2 and turn to pop. What happened? What did I do that violates good timing? Number 1, the command time was okay, wasn't it? I gave the calls in the 2 beats. But the lead time made you rush and stack the calls, didn't it? And the execution time said, I'm not going to give you enough time to dance it, so if you can't make it, tough luck. I'm going to watch you break down. All right? That's an example of several things which you do wrong in timing. Now, if we do everything correctly, dancing is a beautiful, pleasurable experience, and dancers come back year after year. If the caller does poor timing, you can judge the degree of goodness of the caller by watching the dancer's feet. If they're going out the door, he's screwed up. If they're coming in the door, he's done well. Let's give these dancers a big hand. They did a great job. Can we get another group of 8? They've asked me if I would show you one other example of off-phrase calling. Can we get another group of 8 up here? Or the same again, but we need 4 guys and 4 girls. We need a couple more gals. One more now. One more gal. One volunteer. Yes, we need one more, please. I got one. Okay, now, how many of you have ever tried to deliver a call off the heavy beat, or off the first and third beat of music? I find it very difficult to do. I can generally do it once, but I can't do it consistently. How many of you ever had the record Mojo on a Jewel label by Louis Calhoun on the called side? Do yourself a favor and study it, because on the called side of the record, if you put your left hand down when they're moving on the first side of the record, and the right hand down on the number 2 and the 4 beat, as you go through the record, suddenly you'll find a command being given on the right hand. He changes in the record because of the nature of the hoedown. It is not a strongly phrased hoedown. You can call it on either beat, and it doesn't make any difference because it is not a strongly phrased. It is weird. And it's an excellent study, and if you're teaching callers, it's a great tool. We're going to do some on beat, some off beat. Good luck. Heads to right and left 2. Which was that, on or off? Square 2. Swing 2. Boys, run right. Bend it. Right and left 2. Some of them are off and some of them are on. What's the dancing feeling? Bad, isn't it? Pass 2. Partner trade. Reverse your flutter. Decent flow, isn't it? Because the boys are coming into the center. But that affects timing and dancing, doesn't it? Star 2. Pass 2 and trade 5. Single circle 2 away. Boys trade. Boys run. Girls hinge. Center girls trade. All the girls swing through. Boys face right. Girls extend. Girls run around the boys. Lines up to the middle and back. Then pass through. Tag the line. Face in. About half those calls were off the musical phrase, and it dances awkward. I find it very uncomfortable to call that way. If you ever want to, I'll give you a record that I defy anyone to get up here, including my mentor, Jim Mayo, and call this one off phrase. Square through 4. Trade 5. Swing 2. Boys Ferris wheel. You've got to call that an heavy B, don't you? Square through 3. Alabama left. Promenade, go round, a ring, a say. We're going to charge Deco for overacting. Okay, if you have strongly phrased music, it's much easier to give the dancer the musical beat, isn't it? Don't you wish all the record companies gave you strongly phrased hoedowns? You know, if that's the only kind we would buy, and we would only buy singing calls that were properly timed and properly phrased, there are certain record companies who have the double letter for their symbols that would have that 8-beat wait after a promenade that wouldn't sell many records. But the producer doesn't care. Okay, thank you guys.
Okay. Before we open to the floor, one of the things I do want to do is thank both Jerry and John for coming in for their presentation this morning. We hope you will all agree that not only is it fairly complex, but it is most worthy of all of our attention and time. It's probably a lot more important than learning a new call or learning a new singer. If we put maybe that same amount of time, or at least part of that same time, into learning new singing calls as to working on our timing, I think we'd see some improvements. I hear stories. I was not calling at the time to be able to have experienced it, but I hear stories in places in New England and on the west coast of the United States as well, where there was a time when you had 40 squares on the floor and the caller said go 8 to the middle and back, and you could see it done all as one unit, the entire room. That must have been really something to see and to experience as a caller, and I would bet if you could see that happening, it would make us all want to call that way all the time. You know, it would make us strive to make that happen. It's kind of a nice idea. I think it's time for us to open for questions, comments, suggestions, recommendations from anyone here in the room. Please, if you would, if you do want to do that, step to the microphone in the middle so it'll go on the tape, and we can share your thoughts. Here comes one. Good, thank you. Thank you, Ted. Thought we were going to have to break for coffee early.
If Jim Mayo doesn't beat me up, I'd like to ask if we can get callers that are producing records to produce them as John's demonstration this morning of timing. I think that's where a lot of callers go wrong, because we get a record, we turn it over and listen to that caller, and he's got a great figure, and we can't seem to, or a lot of us can't seem to get that retranslated into the 7/8 beat command.
Okay. John's primed and ready. I was going to ask before you do when the next record producers committee meeting is, and if these guys all showed up.
3:30 this afternoon.
They'd be really surprised if you all just showed up and said, hi, we'd like to talk to you.
Let me suggest, if you're wondering what record to call, never listen to the called side of the record. Serious. If you like the music, that's criteria 1. Because you, as a caller, must sell that music, that delivery, that pattern. If you don't believe in the product, you can't sell effectively. So you have to like the music, number 1. Secondarily, look at the key words on the written idiot sheet and see if that figure is good. Learn the traffic pattern of that figure. Dance the traffic pattern with the idiot sheet in your hand. Call the traffic pattern as you dance it with only key words, no filler words, just key words, just command words. Then call it while you're not dancing it. And then finally, after you've learned the traffic pattern, you've learned the command words, you've learned the key words for calling, begin to fill in the what I call the verbal diarrhea, because it really means nothing. You see, a foreign national, those who don't speak either English or American as their native tongue, if you don't miss it, just let's keep it going. But in any case, they have an advantage because they listen for the key words. And any of these other things that you say are extraneous to them. So what is important? And incidentally, singing call techniques. Be able to give a singing call with command or keywords only. You talk about discipline. You're not allowed to sing the chorus. Shut up, motor mouth. You only get to say the key words. You can say promenade and you have to keep quiet for 15 beats or 16 beats. That's how you learn to do a singing call. That's why singing calls are more difficult to do than patter records. Anybody can write a singing call to fit a 64-beat phrase and properly time and get to the corner progression. Because it's been recorded, because that guy got paid to reduce the record or he paid to produce that record, as the case might be, that doesn't give a degree of quality. Danceability is what gives it its quality. We as the callers have that obligation. Thanks for bringing the question up.
Well, John said basically what I was going to say. If the figure does not dance, that doesn't mean you have to use that figure with it. Any 64-beat figure off of any singing call, if it's a better figure, use that. If you have trouble creating one of your own. I do record, and I know some of the problems that are intrinsic that go along with the recording industry. One thing on singing calls that absolutely irritates me to no end is to circle left, alaman left, do, weave the ring, swing on the opposite side, and promenade home. It just absolutely rips me when somebody does that. And I know it happens on our label as well as others. But as yet it hadn't happened on one of mine. It's just something that I personally don't like. And you can change these things. But listen to the music. The music should sell your record. Listen to the music. If it's danceable, if it's a steady beat, has a beat to dance on, and doesn't have that, I call it a straddle hop thing in the middle. If it's goes too wild. But listen to the music. It'll tell you whether you can dance it or not.
One of the things John mentioned, I think it's really critical. Talk about stripping your calling. That's the phrase that was used when I was asked to do it at a caller school in front of a group like this, and they said, no, you have way too much garbage. And I got dubbed garbage mouth because I was very worried about all those extra words as a brand new caller. I had a notebook. I went around. I didn't write down calls or patterns. I wrote down fill words because I didn't know where all those words came from that those callers were using. And they said, now you're not going to do that. You can only call specific command calls. Try it sometime. You don't have to do it to your dancers. Just go home and try sometime taking out all the fill. Nothing but calls. Try even taking out up to the middle and back as well, because often that's how we use that, as a fill, not as a command. And we don't give the dancers the chance to do it. So if you don't give the dancers a chance to do it, be honest with yourself when you're trying this little trick at home, and don't let yourself use it. Treat it as fill. Nothing but right and left through, square through, so on, in time to the music, and listen to what happens. It's very difficult for us to do. Bob, please.
Bob Barry of Alexandria, Virginia. I just wanted to mention the record company. Record companies were meeting yesterday, and we were refused entry. I was surprised.
You were refused entry?
Right.
Interesting.
Only record producers. I just thought I'd point that out.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll check into that.
Jerry, will you represent the viewpoint of these people when you go to the record producers meeting and tell them what they feel about it? You can lower the thing by loosening it there.
That's all right. That's right. It's fine. It's fine.
Get the lady a chair. Get the lady a chair.
Oh, yeah, I need. The only thing I was wondering about is when these callers put out singing calls, and you have people that aren't around where other callers are, and they're trying to learn how to call on their own, and they expect these callers are professional, and they supposedly know what they're doing, and you get records, and they're stacked. The calls are, you don't know it, and you're calling to people, and you're using all their records, and isn't there a way that they could critique these with somebody that is good with their timing to tell the caller that their timing or their record stacked or something? I mean, I expect to be told when I'm wrong. I want to be told. You'd think that they would do something like that with the records that they're putting out for the newer callers.
That's a good question, Joy. And you want to remember that the record producers are their records are advertising, and it is a commercial business. You know, to produce a record costs money, and the guys try to do records that sell. I agree with you totally. That's why I brought that one singing call figure that I brought. I thought that was atrocious. The guy was a pro. I'm not sure he's still calling. But you will find that from time to time. Don't be afraid to screen those.
Oh, I do. If I don't understand, I'm not sure, but I get a caller and I ask them about it, that I feel that knows what they're doing.
Yes, some singing calls simply don't dance very well. They're pretty music or they're a popular song, and the idea is that they will sell. They don't necessarily always dance, and that's why you should listen to your records. It's very important.
But there are people that I know I've talked to that have taught themselves, and they expect these records to teach them how to do the figures and everything, and then they're not right. And I just wonder if there's a way
Let me give you another example of an extremely poor piece of choreography on a singing call. Regardless of how it got there, he had a ladies lead to a Dixie style and Ocean Wave. Picture, if you will, you've got a left-handed Ocean Wave, boys trade, which is fine, swing. How many of you want to buy a trust concession for that record? What other calls would have been available other than the boys trade and swing? Boys cross fold, boys cross run. Either of which dance well, either of which meter well, but if, as you say, the new caller learning and teaching himself or herself, as the case might be, maybe they don't understand body flow. This is why those of us who are in caller training suggest very strongly, attend a reputable caller school as your first step.
Oh, I agree.
Find out what's going on. Get the reference material. And CALLERLAB has published a magnificent reference source, and there's some excellent textbooks in there. The caller training manual, the curriculum guidelines for caller training, is an excellent self-study text, and the supplement, which Jim Mayo has been instrumental in putting together, is a magnificent document which will be coming out shortly. We currently have about 110 pages or 104 pages of it complete, and when we finish, it's going to be an extra maybe 150 pages of supplement. All of these things in here, timing, smooth dancing, mechanics, methods of choreographic control, all of them are going to be covered in detail, how to train, how to learn, how to become a caller. It's going to be a good document. Take advantage of what's available.
In direct reference to your question, though, is how do people know that are trying to learn off of a singing call? It's one of those bad things that happens in our industry or in our recreation, in that, quite frankly, those people are victim to that singing call. They spent $375 for a record that, after they dance it one time, I'm sorry to say, they simply can't dance it again. And I wish there was something more we can do. Ethics on the part of callers, I think, is what needs to be addressed there. But there is an instance where they spent $375 for a record that really is useless, and I wish I could say more in reference to that, but that really answers your question, I think.
Okay, thank you. Next, please. We're going to kind of pop right through here. We're running out of time.
Howard Gilmore from Wisconsin. I'd like to go back to pattern calling. Is there any time after a caller has spent several years trying to memorize the timing chart to the best of his ability, is there any time that he should give that up in order to accommodate the short-cutting dancer?
At the risk of hogging the microphone, I will give you my opinion. There are answers which are clear-cut to black and white. There are answers which are opinion only, and there are those which are somewhere in between. If you are doing the proper job of timing, if you are working properly with your music and the musical phrase, dancers will soon realize that if you give them 8 beats for a forward and back, and that if they finish in 2 and wait for 6, they will begin to dance forward and back the way it was written. You are in control. You can control whether they shortcut or not by letting them trust you, by giving them the proper amount of execution time, by giving them proper lead time, and by giving them proper command time so that they will dance correctly. You don't ever have to worry about giving up learning what proper timing is. They will do it if you're doing the proper job of calling. That's one man's opinion.
I would offer to that also that we often say, well, they're the customer. We're supposed to be entertaining the customer and giving them a good time, and they're not enjoying that. But we are also leaders. We're not just callers. We have to function as leaders, and we recognize the quality of what the product is we're offering, and they need to see what that is. And not, I don't want to say adjust, they need to change to proper dancing, and they will find, we all believe that, I trust, that they will find there is a greater joy in dancing with the music. But I would not adjust for the short-cutting dancer. I will not do it. They're not dancing then. They have changed that. Next, please, John Quaiser.
Yes, getting back to buying a record that doesn't dance well, as Joy brought up. Most of you guys buy the records, and where you buy from, you have an option normally within so many days to mail a record back. And if you'll take the record in question, go downstairs, as John K. mentioned earlier, and dance it. If you want to know if it's not going to time properly, if that figure won't work well, you've got the time to do it. Don't assume that it's right. Dance it yourself. If it doesn't dance well, and you have the ability to change the figure to make it work right, mail the record back. Don't put your dancers through that misery. And as a caller, you should be able to go downstairs and dance that record alone. You don't need 7 other people. You can dance it alone, and you can tell whether it dances well. Dance it from both parts, as a man and as a lady. And if it doesn't work, get rid of it. Send it back. One other thing I wanted to bring up, Jerry might be able to elaborate on this. I'll put him on the spot. Maybe somebody may want to mention the fact of the flow of a dance in reference to the type of floor you're dancing on. Is it a fast wood floor? Is it a sticky linoleum floor? And what are the acoustics like in the building you're calling in? This will all have a great bearing on how you're going to present a dance to the dancers that evening.
Additional factors all over the place. We keep finding more and more of them. Yes, sir?
I'm Al Green from England. I think we look around here, and the people that here are aware of timing, or interested in timing, and want to know about timing. And I think we must assume that everybody else doesn't know, don't think they need to know. And I think possibly this is representative number of the people here is probably a good random sampling of the picture generally. The second point is that looking through CALLERLAB and Caller School curriculums, the emphasis is so much on choreography systems, formations, formation management, but timing, flow takes a very small part of all these curricula. Perhaps if we could recommend that they expand the time and the proportion allocated to this subject, that we might get better results.
It's going to vary with the individual Callers College, and the thing is that a lot of times timing, smooth flow, and smooth dancing and body flow, they're not so much a lecture material as they are on-mic critiquing time. And the quality of that is going to be very much dependent upon the school to which you attend. And the reason I say it that way, in the colleges in which I'm involved, I know how much time we spend on timing and smooth flow and smooth dancing and body flow, and we place a great deal of emphasis on it.
Thank you. One more gentleman, and then we have 2 things to say to you before we break.
I don't want to really pick on record companies, but I have about...
Why not? Everybody else does.
I have about 600 of them at home that I'd like to give to somebody or sell them real cheap. I've noticed some records, in order to make them dance well, you have to play them at a speed of about 41 or 42. I have others that you have to play at a speed of 46 or 46 and a half. Also have some that when you put on, you have to automatically crank down the volume. They're not all done at the same volume. So you have to mark the speed and the volume setting on each one. And it seems to me like we could get the record companies to be more consistent on those 2 things, on speed and volume.
That has to do with engineering. And remember, generally with square dance records, you're talking about some guys who have a very great deal of experience with music. You're talking about some other guys producing records who really have very little or have no engineering ability. You're going to have a lot of variables. Some are doing their records in very expensive studios with very good equipment. Some are doing them very inexpensively on much cheaper equipment. As far as the speed goes, that has to do with the band or the electronic drummer, whatever they do to establish the time. And that's the reason for the speed control on here, because even styles of music simply affect your tempo. And that's the reason for our speed control on the amps.
Okay, thank you, Jerry. Again, a thank you to John Kaltenthaler, Jerry Junck. We appreciate their being in. We think this is an excellent percentage representation of the callers that are here. We appreciate your coming. We would even more appreciate your filling out the critique sheet of the session. We will look at it. We want to use it for future programming purposes at convention. Thank you very much for coming in.